Auschwitz-Birkenau, former German Nazi concentration and extermination camp. The largest cemetery final resting place in the world. Over 1 million Jews, over 100,000 of Poles, Sinti, and Roma, and Soviet prisoners of war. This is not an ordinary museum. Also because no other place saves items such as a broken-off toothbrush or an old suitcase. One of the most modern conservation workshops in the world operates in the former outbuildings of the camp. The remains of the death factory. Priceless and cherished evidence of the crime. Often the last sole remain traces of their owners' lives. Jews were brought to Auschwitz in cattle cars. This is how a few survivors remember this trip.
The train stopped. A rail car door opened with a bang. And then, wild cries and screams in German.
Many mothers are hugging their children already dead. People are falling out of rail cars on the rail ramp. Children are falling from hands onto sharp stones, which stab at their heads and faces.
A kid died in the transport, and when the mother was out hugging her dead child and showed the child to assessment, they were laughing. They snatched the child out and played soccer with it as with a ball.
This doll was found on the campgrounds. It must have been brought here by a child. We don't know who that child was, how old it was, what its name was. Maybe it was a little girl. And given the statistics, it is very unlikely that she survived. It is impossible to think or to talk about this without emotion, to feel calm. Straight away, you start to think about your own children. What toy would your child be hugging, terrified and naked, on their way to the certain death in the gas chamber?
More than 200,000 Jewish and 11,000 Roma children were murdered in the gas chambers of Auschwitz-Birkenau. Several thousand Polish, Belarusian, and Ukrainian children were also sent to the camp. Only a few survived. Right in the middle of this realm of violence and death, among the brick barracks of Birkenau, there is a place like no other. Block 16A. Polish, Ukrainian, and Belarusian children, along with pregnant women and mothers with babies, were held there. The children were starved and beaten in the same way the adult prisoners were. This is how they remember this place.
Nights were the worst. The kids were crying, calling their moms in their sleep. They were yelping, groaning, but as time went by, they became silent, since they knew that nobody would come. Nobody would lay his or her hand on their heads, stroke or hug them.
Children had to get up very early for the morning roll calls. They were ordered to recite in German their camp numbers. Also, when their number was called out, they needed to react without any hesitation. Children slept on such bunks, hard, made of planks, without mattresses, without pillows, without their favorite quilts, and alone.
I remember how much I was afraid of a big black dog.
jumping and barking while on a leash. I was afraid of large floaty cloak and screams of that SS woman. The kids were frightened and were pushing their way to the roll call.
Pytanie o to, jak można było przeżyć tutaj w Auschwitz.
The question of how it was possible to survive here in Auschwitz in such conditions in this barrack is difficult, and really even the survivors themselves don't really have the answer. When I talk to former prisoners, they quite often told me that when today they reflect on what they had experienced here, how much hungry and sick they were, how much they missed their parents, they are not able to comprehend how they were able to survive, how these little children, so fragile, so delicate, could survive under such conditions. They were completely unwanted. They waited to die and died alone, without parents and any tenderness. But one day, as in a fairy tale, an extraordinary thing happened. A stranger with different paints came to Block 16A. This is how a girl who lived in this barrack described the situation after the war.
One day I saw a man who had come and started painting something. Looking at the movements of his hands, we tried to guess what picture would be produced. He drew a house. It was to be a school building. There was a tree nearby the building. There was also a drawing of a boy with a satchel.
Te malowidła właściwie nie wiemy, dlaczego one powstały.
We don't really know why they were created and who ultimately led to it. The prisoners, on the other hand, recall that it was kind of fun to watch the lines being made.
Zastanawiały się, co też takiego
They wondered what was going to arise and turned it into this kind of a guessing game, which for them was undoubtedly a kind of an escape, helping their thoughts run away from the place. A little bit more than 500 children under the age of 15 lived to see the liberation of the camp by the Red Army in January 1945. They left Auschwitz, but Auschwitz never left them.
The horror of camp experiences has remained in my 5-year psyche. Initially, I was unable to behave and to play like other kids who had avoided the camp. I remember having kids kneel with their arms up. Be quiet, because you'll go to the furnace when Mengele comes. Kids were prohibited from crying in a barrack. Those and other mental feelings were suppressed in us by sheer force. And that is why we became mental cripples.
The last traces of the murdered Jewish children are their suitcases, with the names, surnames, and dates of birth written down by their parents.
The Jews were being lied to. They thought they were simply being moved to the east. They packed the things they needed for their new life, clothes and food. They took their most valuable belongings. They knew their belongings would be checked, so they tried to hide them in their clothes and suitcases.
So let us go back to the memories of the survivors.
Alle raus! Alle stehen lassen!
We left our belongings.
I thought that things would go wrong for me because I had forgotten to mark my suitcase, so I might then be given the wrong one.
How will we recognize our belongings? Where will they be stored?
The people are all gone. Only their belongings remained on the ramp. Now, transported on trucks, they will get to Canada. This was what the prisoners called the large camp warehouses, because before the war, Canada was synonymous with prosperity and abundance. Once there, the things were selected. Suitcases were ripped open in search of money and valuables.
After the suitcases were taken from their owners on the railway ramp, they were taken to the camp warehouses. They were stacked in huge piles and carefully inspected for valuable items and money.
We approach conservation here in a special way, unlike a restorer to the conservation of works of art. We do not repair objects to their original state. We do not repair them, we do not renew them, we preserve their conditions in which they were found. We take care of all traces of deformations, traces of use that tell the story of a given person or object. Our conservators preserve even dried up mud and lichens, which testify to the circumstances in which the objects were left.
It was to be a total annihilation. Not only did the Germans want to murder all European Jews, they also wanted to erase all the traces of their crimes. That is why today restorers and museum experts work as if they were true detectives. With the help of the latest technologies, they analyze even the smallest traces of someone's life. When they are not able to discover the identity of the suitcase owner, they analyze the hotel stickers on the luggage to reconstruct where the person traveled. So who were they? Let's take a look at one of the 3,800 suitcases that have survived to this day.
This is another example of a suitcase that we have in our collection department. And this is an example of a suitcase which one would consider as a middle class. In the inside, we have textile lining and a pocket and a clasp, which is leather. Also, the name of the company that made it. On the surface, we have name and a surname, so Wilma Bass, and the number of the transport, X396.
The suitcases are not silent. They still tell us about their owners. Surprising discoveries continue to occur. Such was the case of an anonymous suitcase, which was on display stacked at the top of other suitcases until a student from Berlin noticed it. As it turned out, the owner was a very famous person.
Else Uhre was a recognized writer of books for children and teenagers. Her most famous series of books about the adventures of adolescent girl was extremely popular in Germany among young ladies in 1920s and 30s. Else didn't believe that something bad would threaten her, and even she had a chance to leave from Berlin, she didn't do it. She said, "Nothing could happen to me." On January 6, 1943, she was arrested and a week later she was taken to Auschwitz, where she was murdered in the gas chamber.
Elsa Ure left behind a suitcase with a number of books for children that ended up in Canada's warehouses. There, however, another fairy tale story begins.
A long time ago, as the rumor spreads in a clearing next to the forest, there lived a lop-eared bunny. His cabin was comfortable and dry. The one that he built himself out of bark.
We are not sure when exactly the book brought here by the Jewish deportees was found in one of the camp warehouses, so-called Canada. The book belonged to the child, the Jewish child who was killed in gas chamber. That was the big impact for the prisoners from Bauleitung, to imagine that this book belonged to the baby who was murdered. They started to think about their own children who are so far away in their houses with their families, with their mothers. They wanted to send a sign of their love.
Stanislav Bench missed his son Andrzej. Henryk Czurda had to leave his little 2-year-old Zbyszek behind the barbed wires. Bernard Świerczyna's son, Felician, was born 2 months after his arrest and deportation to Auschwitz.
One of the examples how longing for the family was important is an example of fairy tales for children from Auschwitz, produced here illegally by prisoners themselves. So that was kind of the fight for themselves, that they wanted to publish these illegal fairy tales for their children.
If the Germans discover their intentions, the prisoners will die. But they go to work anyway. They either translate or write fairy tales themselves. Secretly, they make beautiful illustrations. Some work in the Bauleitung, an institution that prepares architectural plans for the camp. Thanks to this, they have access to the materials. The first copy, a so-called matrix, was made on a tracing paper. And because in Bauleitung there was a modern copier named Ozalid, they were able to copy using photosensitive or photographic paper.
Możliwość kopiowania na papierze światłoczułym bądź na papierze fotograficznym.
At least 27 prisoners were involved in the work on the fairy tales. They managed to publish 6 titles. Almost all the copies went either to their children or to children from families living around the camp, who, risking their lives, helped the prisoners. However, the most touching story is the story of a fairy tale for Bernard Świerczyna's son, who was born when Bernard was already in the camp. In unexplained circumstances, he managed to pass the fairy tale to his son outside the camp with the help of a mysterious SS man. We don't know why the German did it. Maybe he was a father himself.
However, Bernard Świerczyna still dreamed of finally seeing Felek up close. There was only one chance, but it was one chance in a million. Świerczyna was responsible for transporting dirty camp cloth to a laundry in Bielsko. By slightly changing the route, the truck could pass the house where his family lived.
finally, one day a miracle happened. Bernard sees his son Felix walking down the street with his aunt and neighbor. He jumps out of the truck, and for the first time in his life, he hugs a dazed and oblivious to it all child. The SS man had to turn a blind eye to these few seconds of indescribable happiness. Was it the same German who previously brought a dedicated fairy tale to Felix?
Soon Bernard Ćwierćina decided to do an even bolder act. And once again, he needed the laundry track and the help of the SS man.
The last execution in the history of the camp, of the prisoners sentenced for their attempted unsuccessful escape, is about to happen. Among them is Bernard Ćwierćina.
Planned day of the escape, 5 prisoners hid in the truck shortly before leaving the camp. But the truck was stopped and turned back at the checkpoint, and it was sent back under the escort of assessment to Block 11, which was a camp rest.
Let us listen to the memories of an eyewitness to the execution.
The SS man jumped up, pressing upon the drop lever. There was silence. The sentence was carried out.
One can learn from this fairy tale that one whose garment is lined with cowardliness, he will always be wretched and shall live without a name or with a name of oblivion.
Here is to you, Felician, on your mother's birthday, blessed by your father. This is written by my dad, most likely primarily to me. Felician Ćwierćina, son of Bernard Ćwierćina. Thank you very much. Stone, wood, metal, everything material gets destroyed through natural processes. These processes can only be slowed down by years, decades, centuries. There is one item in the Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial of such importance that it was placed in a sealed case, filled not with oxygen, but with nitrogen. The object that was the last witness to the death of hundreds of thousands of children, women, and men.
I remember when the door was placed into the display case. It was during the middle of the night. Everyone worked in complete silence. One of the conservators approached me and handed me gloves. He said, "We are about to close. This is the last chance you can touch the door." In my head, there were dozens of images. I saw people being murdered with gas, women, little children, and I took back my hand. I just wasn't able to do it. I will never touch this door again, and I think This is how it should be.
Let us listen to the memories of some miraculously survived prisoners who were forced by the Germans to work in the gas chambers.
When they were extremely jammed into the gas chamber, they became suspicious of something. It was too late for self-defense or fighting.
When the chamber was full, the assessment shut the door.
The German supervisor often tormented the victims. While waiting for the SS man who let the gas in, he switched the light on and off to terrify the victims. When the light went out, there was a peculiar sound in the chamber, as if people were choking with fear, realizing they were going to die. When it went on, they seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, perhaps believing that the action had been called off.
Drzwi drewniane, specjalnie wzmocnione.
Wooden door with specially reinforced metal fittings, on which the metal clamps visible here were mounted. Then the door was screwed down in order to make it airtight, so that the gas wouldn't leak outside, and in order to make it impossible for the victims to force the door open.
They were screaming, but who was supposed to listen to them? The gas had already been thrown in.
People were scratching the walls with their nails. There were nail marks all over the walls.
Instinctively, they ran up to the door. Initially, a knocking could be heard.
It might have lasted for 10, perhaps 12 minutes. Then, only dead silence.
W tym miejscu, które obecnie jest zaślepione.
In this exact place, which is now sealed off, there used to be a special peephole, a kind of window which made it possible to look inside the gas chamber. The peephole was fitted on the inside with a metal safety net, so that the victims in their act of despair would simply not break the glass. However, from the accounts of the witnesses, we do know that these windows were very often broken by the victims in their sheer act of despair. And this exact door testifies to it, because this opening, which was located in the middle of the door, is sealed here. To this day, no photos documenting the terrible deaths of children, women, and men inside the chamber have emerged. However, the pictures recreated from memory of a French Jew forced by the Germans to work in the Sonderkommando in a group of prisoners operating the gas chambers and crematoria are a remarkable proof. This photo shows the gas chamber and crematorium 5 in Birkenau. It's January 26, 1945. 1 o'clock in the morning. a cannonade of the approaching Soviet troops can be heard from the distance. Suddenly, the camp is shaken by a powerful explosion. The SS men blew up the last of the Canal gas chambers in order to cover up the traces of the Holocaust. The force of the blast was so powerful that the door was ripped off its hinges. During the Holocaust, they were exactly here or here. The aerial photo of the camp shows 4 chambers and crematoria, marked by the Germans with numbers 5, 4, 3, and 2. In the last one, there is something deep under the rubble that the Germans did not manage to destroy. Something that, apart from the conservators, no one sees and never touches.
In the ruins of the gas chamber number 2, under the ceiling debris, there is a space when the floor of the gas chamber is accessible. It is a unique and extremely demanding place for us, because each time we work here, we are fully aware of the history of this space.
On this floor, crowded to the limit, Jews died in agony. Children, adults, and the elderly. They felt the floor under their feet in the darkness in the last seconds of their lives.
This is also a place where the people don't cry so often as in Auschwitz I. At the entrance, when they see the human hair or children clothes. And in this moment, the people, the visitors, know there is the place where the people lost their lives. And here they are fully aware of the gravity of the crime.
The Beskids, the picturesque mountains, perfectly visible from the vicinity of Oświęcim. It is from here that the photographs come, which were supposed to be a reminder of happy moments, but instead became a frightening testimony of the heartlessness of the criminals.
We can see a group of young women from the auxiliary service, SS Helferinnen. In Auschwitz, those women work as radiotelegraphists. They are laughing, at ease, gorging themselves on berries from the nearby wood. They are accompanied by a man playing the accordion.
In the next 2 photos, we can see how much laughter was caused by the sudden rain. Zola Hite, literally translated, a shelter on the Zola River. The center was located in Porąbka village. The first SS men from Auschwitz had rested here with their families since 1940. We would never have seen how these people, responsible for the murder of thousands of children, women, and men, used to spend their weekends off duty, if it were not for one man.
The album of Karl Hecker came to light relatively late. In 2007, a private donor handed it over to the collection of Holocaust Museum in Washington. This is a commemorative photo album belonging to Karl Hecker, who was the adjutant to the last commander of the main camp, Richard Baer.
The album contains 116 unique photographs documenting various events in the life of the Auschwitz staff. Visits of Nazi dignitaries, shooting competitions, or the funerals of SS men killed in an Allied air raid.
I'm particularly impressed by a sequence of photographs with SS Soldaten. SS men are clearly at ease, relaxed, chatting, some of them smoking cigarettes. But their presence at Soldaten will also come to an end. From Monday onwards, all those persons will be on duty at Auschwitz. Baer and Kramer will manage the camps. Otto Moll will be in charge of the crematorium, whereas Josef Mengele will perform experiments on kids and selection among the new transports.
After the war, Karl Hecker worked in a German bank. In the 1960s, he was brought to trial in Frankfurt for the crimes committed in Auschwitz. He was sentenced to 7 years in prison. After that, he returned to normal life. However, in 1989, he was brought to trial again, this time for his crimes committed in the Majdanek camp. Sentence: 4 years in prison. This criminal has already died at large. He was 88 years old.
Please deliver this letter to the nearest Greek consulate. After a 10-day journey, we arrived at Auschwitz, from where we were transferred to the Birkenau camp. And once there, those physically fit and strong were selected. Where? Where? To the crematorium. This is a wish of a man condemned to death by the Germans because I am Jewish. Thank you, Marcel Najari.
What could someone have done while awaiting their own death in Auschwitz-Birkenau? It seems like nothing, like they were completely powerless. Yet these people somehow managed to do something. From our childhood, we remember made-up stories of a shipwreck survivor being trapped on a deserted island. He puts a letter into a bottle, throws it into the ocean, and hopes that someone will find it. The Jews sentenced to death in Auschwitz did that in reality. And what is even more extraordinary, after years, their messages got to the addressees, to us.
After the war, the huge area of Birkenau, the largest death camp in the world, was overgrown with grass and bushes. The area is regularly cleared by students of the Forestry Technical School in Brünneck. It's October 24th, 1980. In the vicinity of the ruins of the gas chamber and the crematorium number 3, at a depth of about 30 centimeters, one of the students finds a leather briefcase. Inside, there is a glass thermos flask.
Near the ruins of the gas chamber number 3, a glass thermos was found. It was found broken. The water that got inside in the past destroyed its priceless content.
Inside there were 6 double-sided pages written in fine print. All of them torn out from the notebook and carefully placed to the thermos.
Since this object was found in the immediate vicinity of the former crematory, we can assume that those notes were written by a Sonderkommando prisoner.
Sonderkommando, a word that denotes a group for special works. Who were the prisoners of the Sonderkommando? Young men, mainly Jews, selected from among the newly arrived transports, who, under the threat of immediate death, were forced to operate the facilities of the death camp. First of all, for burning down the bodies of the murdered. People who were isolated from other prisoners of the camp. They knew they would die, that the SS would never let them out of their clutches.
It is a big building with a massive chimney stack, with 15 crematorium ovens. There are 2 large, spacious underground chambers under the garden. One is used for undressing. Most had no idea about their fate. Some laughed, others cried. They were told that they are about to take a shower, so they helplessly walked to their deaths. To death, my beloved ones. Then I would close the hermetic door.
Being at the very bottom of hell, these people still manage to find their humanity. They want to leave a trace of themselves. So since 1943, they have been planning to leave behind a legacy of evidence of the crimes. Notes describing the events of the crematoria. Farewell letters for their families. In 1980, it was discovered that the author of the notes was a Greek Jew, soldier, and partisan, Marcel Nadjari. But most of his text, which is a priceless eyewitness account of the unimaginable crime of the Holocaust, seemed to be lost forever.
The difficulty in reading those notes was that they were double-sided. The ink penetrated the paper, and what was written on one side was visible on other, and vice versa.
However, after another 30 years, there was a shadow of hope that reading the blurry spots would be possible. All thanks to a unique technology, multispectral imaging, which allows you to see more details and shades.
Using this system, changing the wavelengths from ultraviolet through visible to infrared, I record 12 images, which are then form a base for further analysis and further research, which should allow us to see something more than with our naked eye or with the standard photographic equipment.
Almost 6 years of painstaking research and analysis, the most modern optical equipment, the fight for every word and letter. And finally, the effect exceeded all expectations. After nearly 75 years, scientists have miraculously published the complete text by Marcel Nadjari.
My beloved, when you read about the work I do, you will ask how I was able to burn my fellow believers. And at the beginning, I also thought many times about entering the oven with them and ending my life. But I was always held back by the desire for revenge. I wanted, and I still want to live in order to avenge the death of Dad, Mom, and my little sister Nellie. I am not afraid of death. Is it even possible to be afraid after all I have seen?
Marcel Nadjari survived being in the camp, which is a miracle too. After the war, he returned to Greece. He started his own family, and later he moved to the United States. He named his daughter Nellie, the same name his little beloved sister, who was murdered in a gas chamber in Birkenau, had. He himself died in 1971. During his life, he was unable to fulfill one of his resolutions: to avenge his mother, his father, and his beloved sister.
Can one deceive such a horrific system of evil? You can, but you need a plan. Here is a license plate of the SS car, seemingly just a piece of sheet metal. But in the time of the extermination, such an object gives 4 men a chance to escape their death.
It was one of the most spectacular escapes in the history of Auschwitz, although it's hard to be ranking them. If someone in Hollywood wrote a script like that, the producer would throw them out the door and say that there is no way anybody would ever believe this story.
Here are the main characters. Kazimierz Piechowski, age 24. A scout prior to the war, noble and tough, never afraid of taking risk. Stanislav Yasta, 21. Also a scout, avid sailor, 2 meters tall, very broad in his shoulders. Józef Lempart, 26. A priest. He agreed to escape without any hesitation, always able to keep a cool head in the worst situations. And this is the 1939 Steyr 220, a beautiful Austrian convertible that was driven during the breakaway by Eugeniusz Bandera, age 42, number 8502. Strong, swarthy complexion, and hellishly brave. A car mechanic unmatched in his profession. He repaired cars on which helpless German mechanics long gave up.
Everything began here in the camp garage, and from Eugeniusz Bandera receiving a warning that he's lined up to be murdered soon. He decides to risk everything and attempts to escape. His plan is to steal an SS car and drive out. He can't do this alone, so he gets Kazimierz Piechowski in on his plan. They want to steal SS uniforms, and they form a fictional commando, Rollwagen Commando, a group of 4 prisoners that pulled a wagon that was used for the transport of materials and garbage. That's how a group of 4 escapees was formed. Finally, they are ready. But can one truly be ready for something like this?
Let's experience this audacious escape, together with one of the daredevils. This is the account of Kazimierz Piechowski. It's June 20, 1942. Saturday. The last moments before the planned escape.
Okay, guys, we'll make it. We shook hands.
Prisoners change into uniforms. They check their weapons. Piechowski is an Untersturmführer, the highest rank, because he is the only one who knows German well enough. Bandera brings the beautiful Austrian Steyr 220 convertible. The do-or-die game begins. They got everything to lose. Let's just cross the gate that separates hell and death from freedom and life.
About 40 meters from the border. We are wearing SS uniforms, have a car with an SS license plate. But they are not raising the barrier. Genek changes down to 3rd gear. still not raised. One bastard is sitting in a Postenbude guard's box. A band thrown into a hand machine gun. Still closed. Genek changes down to first gear. We are barely moving. Still 15, perhaps 10 steps to the barrier. On those last meters, I'm no longer in the camp. I'm at my mom's. I'm bidding farewell. At that moment, I feel a hard blow to the nape of my neck, and I hear, Kazik, do something. I cast off my apathy. I'm exposing my arm so that he can see my insignias and screaming, Mach hier auf! Are you sleeping or what? How long should we be waiting here? The assessment has jumped up to the crank and is raising the barrier. We are driving up slowly. The assessment are greeting us, raising their stretched arms. So do I, as if casually, Heil Hitler. We are past the barrier.
Kazimierz Piechowski lived until he was 98 years old. He fascinated the young people, tough, noble, wise and honest. When he told the story of his escape, he often said, on one side there was the SS, armed up till their teeth, a huge system of violence and terror. On the other, 4 prisoners that the Germans took for nothing. That's what was fascinating about him. His escape and his whole life was about one message: never give up.